Among the rebel and government-backed forces in Syria are nearly 2,000 U.S. troops. Thankfully, Defense Secretary James Mattis says none of them were in harm's way during last night's airstrikes. Joining me now with a look at the military perspective, Heritage Foundation visiting fellow and former Army Special Forces officer Steve Bucci. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I wanted to get your perspective today because I'm sort of curious as to, yes, we heard the announcement from the president, and almost seconds later, and even during his speech, we were getting immediate reports of bombings taking place. But that takes some preparation, obviously. Can you sort of walk me through what happened last week?
Absolutely. The president gives his initial intent to the Department of Defense folks, and they go back and start looking at options. They'll come back to the president in the midst of the process to try and either get more guidance or to offer him something he may not have asked for initially as another option. And then they just go through that process, and it took a week, which sounds like a long time, but for this kind of precision was pretty darn fast.
There's ping-ponging and then also bringing in other countries, because obviously this is a coalition effort.
And that complicates it further. If it was unilateral, it's relatively simple.
And also
when you
support.
Add others,
we talked about where they had to go in. The other countries had to assist just because they weren't necessarily.
We had to get permission from Qatar to fly out of their air base. There's airspace issues, those sort of things.
I'm curious as to the troops that are on the ground. There's 2,000 men and women on the ground, and just was it more than a week ago, we had heard that they were going to be sort of drawing back out of Syria. We heard that from President Trump. What now? What are they thinking right now? I mean, has their mission changed?
At this point, no, it hasn't. This was, as Secretary Mattis described, a one-time shot to try and deter and degrade Assad from using chemical weapons. It is not a new mission creep. It's not something different than what those folks were doing.
Do you think this is a one-off?
It's a one-off right now, and depending on what Assad does, there could be follow-ons. This is a continuing effort, but it's not a day-to-day air campaign yet. So those folks on the ground are going to continue the missions they were doing, fighting ISIS, working with our friends, and going after our enemies. And a lot of them are very, very well informed about this stuff. Our commanders keep those young folks informed, and some of them are not that young. Some of them are very experienced, special forces guys who have a lot of miles on them. They get the politics.
What does that do for your mindset? I mean, obviously, you're trained, and maybe it's just hard for me to fathom when you have to go from thinking that perhaps there's going to be withdrawal to there could be an escalation. We just don't know.
I have made 20 deployments in my career on active duty. I came back on time, on schedule once out of those 20.
So you're trained for this.
Those kind of changes happen all the time. Our folks are used to them. We have a professional military. They're not a bunch of draftees. They get this, and while they'd be happy to come home if the president said come home, they understand why they're there, and they want to do the right thing.
Yeah, they're the best in the world. Mr. Bucci, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thanks for
and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.